This is the Hustler's Corner.
Good evening, world, to all the hustlers all across the world. I'd like to welcome you to the Hustler's Corner. My name is DJ Smooth, all the way straight up from Johannesburg in South Africa. Let me first start with our notification gang. Guys, let's go straight to the sharp sign. On the count of three, we're clicking those like buttons. 1, 2, 3. Click, 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 click. Thank you very much for tuning in. In case you've just bumped into this video by accident, make sure that you subscribe to the Hustler's Corner, which is a platform and a podcast available on every platform all over the world that is there to inspire a new generation of hustlers. On the previous videos, I have been reading I Write What I Like by Stephen Bantu Biko, the late great, who passed on sadly back in 1977. He's one of our ancestors who gave us those ideologies on what it is like to be black conscious. He led the black consciousness movement, and I've been reading the preface by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I read the introduction by his son, Nkosinathi Biko. Right now I'm going to be reading the foreword. That's what this video is for. To make sure that these videos are not long enough, because I understand you guys are so busy, we've got a lot to do. I want to keep them to at least 10 minutes. So I'll be splitting. As I've read the preface, it's got its own video. I've read the introduction, it's got its own video. Now this foreword as well, it's got its own video. And then from chapter 1, it's going to have its own video, chapter 2, chapter 3, etc. Now, by the way, let me just throw this disclaimer there that these reading sessions or these book reading sessions on the Hustler's Corner are strictly for educational purposes. They are not for commercial usage at all. Now, this is the 40th edition, Stephen Bantu Biko, I Write What I Like. The foreword by Njabulo S Ndebel. Let's dive into it. Njabulo S Ndebel is an established scholar, public figure, and a best-selling author whose critical and creative writing has tackled the effects of apartheid on oppressed communities, the rhetoric of protest, democracy and reconciliation, and the system of higher education in South Africa. He is currently the chairperson of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and he regularly plays the role of public intellectual through his interventions in the media on topical issues facing South Africa. Now, this starts, the foreword. The Envisioned Self by Njabulo S Ndebel. The envisioned self, this expression has lain innocuously between the covers of I Write What I Like, Steve Biko's enduring book. I must have read and reread this expression over the years, but how come I didn't see it? How come my mind didn't take in what my eyes must have seen? Or was it my mind's eyes skipped over the expression each time? Can a reader read unseeingly? I think so. This realization made sense when, on an impulse in January 2017, a few days into the writing of this foreword, I retrieved from my bookshelf a treasured gift of 38 years ago. It was the hardcover of the Bowedian Press edition of I Write What I Like. 1978, the year of its publication, had just ended when this book, with its black and white cover, came into my life. With nostalgia stirring inside of me, I reread Father Elred Stubbs' inscription on the title page of the book he had edited for Njabulo and Ndebel with gratitude and affection, and in hope for better things yet to come. He dated it January 1979. I pondered his small, neat handwriting, inscribed with so light a touch as if he had not wanted to leave a mark on the page. Even in the very act of inscribing words, marks on it with indelible ink. Martyr of Hope, a personal memoir, is the last chapter of I Write What I Like. In it, Mr. Stubbs reflects on his enduring relationship with Steve Biko. It is the last paragraph of the memoir that is now subjected of my reflection. The entire paragraph is a long quotation from a letter by Malusi Mpumloana, described by Mr. Stubbs as a devoted friend of Steve. A Christmas card from Mr. Stubbs elicited effusive gratitude from Mpumloana. When the Son of Man called himself that during his lifetime on earth, Mpumloana wrote, his followers never knew the meaning of the term, but now Mpumloana, a follower of Christ, has grasped it. The Son of Man was a poet of powerful in speech and action before God and the whole people. The power of this meaning hits home in retrospect. Significance emerges in the slow cooking of time. It has taken me 38 years to grasp a piece of Mr. Stubbs' inscription, better things yet to come, suddenly flashed across the sky like lightning, at the end of which the expression, the envisioned self, revealed itself. Its full meaning, while Mr. Stubbs was still alive, had simply washed over me. 38 years later, I finally noticed and grasped it. In Stubbs, better things yet to come was like the second coming that Christians patiently wait for. Steve Biko's envisioned self was the form of its coming. What could it be in South Africa today that has crystallized the meaning of the envisioned self with such emergent clarity? In the slow cooking of time, I read yet missed the resonance of the envisioned self in my reading of the Raven Press edition of 1996. 18 years after the edition of my gift, I missed it yet again with the 2004 Picador edition with its phenomenal 11 reprints. For the purpose of writing this foreword, HB pencil in hand, I chose the Raven Press edition reprint of 2000 to mark it purposefully, without Mr. Stubbs' soft, hesitant markings. Perhaps it is this edition's moving preface by Archbishop Desmond Tutu and insightful introduction by Malusi and Togompumlwana that predisposed me to discover the envisioned self. Blacks are out to completely transform the system and to make of it what they wish, writes Biko. Such a major undertaking can only be realized in an atmosphere where people are convinced of the truth inherent in their stand. Liberation is of paramount importance in the concept of Black consciousness, for we cannot be conscious of ourselves and yet remain in bondage. We want to attain the envisioned self, my emphasis, which is a free self. Every truth, it seems, has its time. Before that time arrives, the truth may be seen, perhaps even intuited, but never really grasped. The intuition of it may have a great deal to do with the circumstances in which the truth originated. If we want to attain the envisioned self, which is a free self, it is because the source of that intention is the prevailing condition of unfreedom. The conditions of unfreedom and their effects on people, unless they are ended soon, are transferred from one generation to another. Each generation may find something to emphasize, and the next something else, such that there is change and yet continuity in witness. My own journey towards an envisioned self, whose significance I could not grasp fully at the time, was how in the years of unfreedom, Black consciousness reduced significantly my fear of the white oppressor. As I feared him less, the freer I felt in an unfree country, I could claim a space of personal freedom that was well beyond the oppressor's reach. I think this is what thousands of students must have experienced at the University of North, now Limpopo, on the many times that the apartheid South African Defence Force occupied their campus for a few years. The physical occupation of the campus by the army could not extend to the occupation of the students' minds and hearts. These were beyond the reach of the meanest oppressor. There can be no greater symbol of a free mind in an unfree country, that of Nkgopotse Abraham Tiro, president of the Students' Representative Council. On 29 April 1972, 45 years ago, he delivered his historic graduation address. In that address, he named the contradiction and hypocrisy of a campus ostensibly made for Black people but run entirely by white people. The white management of the university heard him clearly and did not like his message. Tiro was to die in 1974 in Botswana when he opened a parcel bomb. Clearly he was killed. 4 years later, after Tiro's speech, the Soweto student uprisings occurred on the 16th of June 1976. This was followed some years later by a countrywide state of emergency declared by the then president P.W. Botha on July 20th, 1985, which was to last for several years. The path to 27th April 1994 may not have been clearly visible, but was an imaginable reality. Up to April 1994, with the space of freedom open within themselves, the oppressed of South Africa focused on the means of removing the shackles of over 100 years of conquest. It is against this kind of background that it has taken 38 years for Alred Stubbs' words, "better things to come," to leap off the page and strike me in ways they never did when I read and then reread the chapter entitled "The Definition of Black Consciousness" in I Write What I Like. It seemed as if Steve Biko's The Envisioned Self prefigured Stubbs' better things to come. There is a journey of the body through places and the journey of the mind through avenues of meaning. The journey of both body and mind finally put Tiro in that particular place and time to reveal his envisioned self with an effulgence never to be forgotten. Perhaps the journey of the mind is spurred on by reading. Reading, it seems, includes noting and quite clearly sometimes instant forgetting. But it is forgetting of a special kind. It does not equate with erasure. This forgetting is a kind of retained essence of experience, a kind of subliminal remembrance, a kind of presence of memory as a beacon to draw you back should you need to reconfirm it. Perhaps with pencil in hand, I had predisposed myself to find gold and diamonds to underscore and rectangles in which to encase passages of rediscovered significance. The envisioned self was Steve Biko's futuristic concept, which he called for more than just the recovery of a human essence dismembered, distorted, disorientated, and oppressed, but also for how that essence could be recovered and remolded under new historical circumstances, spanning more than 150 years of painful yet purposeful effort of seeking to reconstitute it into a new human being. I would like to arrive at this new human being through another remarkable thinker of Steve Biko's time, the poet Mafika Gwala. I remember him as one of its most incisive philosophers on Black consciousness in South Africa in the 1970s. In 1973, he wrote "It is not our black awareness that determines our black being." I repeat, he wrote, and this is the philosopher, the poet Mafika Gwala. He wrote, "It is not our black awareness that determines our black being. Contrawise, it is our black being, the fact that we are black in a white-dominated society, that determines our black awareness." Black awareness, then, for Gwala is a manifestation of history, not an inherent state of being. General Smuts, following Cecil John Rhodes earlier, made a very categorical statement about the ideological nature of race and racism. Long before the nationalists came to power, Smuts declared there are certain things on which all South Africans agreed. The first of these is that it is a fixed policy to maintain white supremacy in South Africa. What Smuts is asserting in that whiteness would always precede blackness, because whiteness would always precede blackness, because whiteness as power created blackness to be its powerless opposite. It is Gwala's insistence that since such precedence is historically determined, it can also be historically terminated. How it gets to be terminated has something to do with the envisioned self of oppressed people when they become free. Free black people erase whiteness when the latter ceases to be a historic condition of oppression which black being has been constructed. Mafiga Gwala, aware of the impermanency of racial categories despite their brutal reality in societies which are ordered by them, conveyed his awareness of their limitations. We didn't take black consciousness as a kind of Bible. It was just a trend, a necessary one, because it meant bringing in what the white oppression couldn't bring into the struggle. The white opposition would naturally assume the permanence of what brought them daily benefits through the denigration of those who are black, and whose denigration was an essential factor of white privilege, reproduced through a structured system of oppression. By definition, blackness would have to end when those oppressed, now free to achieve their envisioned self, upon ending their nightmare, set out to create a new person for a new society. Gwala foresaw the historical moment when the notion of black being would cease to have any meaning in the determination of human identity. Then perhaps those who once partook of black being would cease to exist always in opposition to something else, with the implication that that something else was eminently constitutive of black being outside of black being's own agency. It is precisely this condition of no longer being the opposite of someone else's definition of themselves that leads us to Steve Biko's envisioned self. The envisioned self is not an essence. It is a living reality achieved in the social sphere out of the agency of free people. What becomes critical for millions of South African citizens who were enfranchised in 1994 is the question: what is it that constitutes their agency? The envisioned self believes in the righteous of its strength. Believing in its humanistic goals, it is inclusionary, creating room for all who wish to participate in its emancipatory norms. What is the likelihood that the envisioned self, reflecting on the achievements of its visionary, purposeful agency, might in 2044 write a book called I Write What I Live? Meanwhile, in 2017, this new edition of I Write What I Like builds on the history of a book that became a symbol of triumph of free human agency in unfree conditions. How far has the envisioned self gone in setting up a new human norm in the terms once described by Steve Biko in the evidence he led under cross-examination in 1976 in May in the SASO BPC trial? Defense counsel advocate David Sogot leads Biko. Sogot starts. Mr. Biko, would you refer to resolution 42 on page 249? In paragraph 2, there you have referred to the definition of black people, which I will not trouble you with, but paragraph 3, I should like you to deal with. SASO believes, if you will read A, please. And then Steve Biko comes. Yes, SASO believes that A, South Africa is a country in which both black and white live and shall continue to live together. And then Sogot. Now, what does that mean, Mr. Biko? And then Biko comes. Well, this means that we accept the fact that the present South African society is a plural society with contributions having been made to its development, all segments of the community. In other words, we speak of the groupings, both black and white. We have no intention of course, we regard ourselves as people who stay here and shall stay here because this is our motherland. And we made the point that we've got no intention whatsoever of seeing white people leave this country. When I say leave, I mean leave this country. And then so it comes. Leave? Stephen Biko goes, yes. Sogot again. L-E-A-V-E, leave? Steve Biko. That is right. We intend to see them staying here side by side with us, maintaining a society in which everybody shall contribute proportionally. So good. I wonder in this context, would you please have a look at SASO, GI Resolution 45 on page 206, Steve Biko. All right. So good. Would you read from This Country Belongs? And then Steve Biko reading. Therefore, we wish explicitly to state that this country belongs to black people and to them alone. Whites who live in this country on terms laid down by blacks and on condition that they respect black people. This should not be construed as anti-whiteism. It only means that in as much as black people live in Europe on terms laid by Europeans, whites shall be subjected to the same conditions here in South Africa, being our motherland. We further wish to state that in our opinion, it shall always be, and then Sogot comes in. Can you explain what SASO meant by this resolution? Steve Biko. Well, I must explain, I was not at this particular meeting, but from reading this document, what I understand it to mean is that this country is essentially a country in Africa, a continent which is inhabited always naturally by black people. And what whites? It is conceived that whites are here and they may live in the country depending on their relationship with blacks and their acceptance of whatever conditions blacks in this country shall lay at a certain time. I don't know what time the resolution is referring to. Interesting. Continuing with the reading. Did 1994 become that time? In 2017, what exactly is the state of the envisioned self? How deep are the responsibilities of becoming the norm? What is the work to be undertaken? What will it inquire to undertake it? In the third decade since 1994, the questions cry out to be answered by all South African citizens. By the burden of agency in seeking answers rests squarely with those once oppressed, who in the third decade of their freedom must pursue their envisioned self. Njabulo S Ndebel is an established scholar, public figure, and best-selling author whose critical and creative writing has tackled the effects of apartheid on oppressed communities, the rhetoric of protest, democracy, and reconciliation, and the system of higher education in South Africa. He is currently the chairperson of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and he regularly plays the role of public intellectual through his interventions in the media on topical issues facing South Africa. Moving quickly to the personal, that was the foreword, guys, by the way. I'm quickly going to read you guys the personal reflections on Steve Biko and Black consciousness. And then from there, I wrap up this video. The next video will be chapter 1 of I Write What I Like, the 40th edition. I hope you guys are enjoying it and are learning. If you're not understanding, according to my reading, I did something called the inferior education system when I was growing up in South Africa. It was called Bantu education. So I never went to any multiracial schools. I've had to self-teach myself how to read and how to speak better, seeing that I obviously took up a career in broadcasting, but I've become a better reader over the years. But you will forgive me on my pronunciations as they are very African. And at some points, I'll make mistakes on certain words, but I hope you guys can rewind the video and play again, since I'm reading on your behalf in case you are lazy to read. I am here for you to do you guys all of that justice, because I would like all of our African brothers all over the world to know about our African history, and all of you hustlers out there should know how important it is to know who you are, where you come from, what you represent, and where you're going, so that when you're building your businesses, you should be Black conscious enough to be for your people. That's why I myself, as Sibusiso Lopwe, I'm conscious enough with every decision I take in business to be for the people, although I am not a politician. A quick one. This one won't even take us 3 minutes. The personal reflections on Steve Biko and Black consciousness. In this 40th anniversary edition of I Write What I Like, a book first published in the year of Steve Biko's death, there is an opportunity for reflection not only on the words in which he expressed his philosophy, but also on the practical impact of these words on the lives of people all over the globe. In this brief section, we include the observations of 4 activists, geographically separated across 3 continents, but all united in their acknowledgement of the motivation, guidance, and encouragement that each obtained from this book. Each contribution records how, even in different decades of this and the last century, Steve Biko's seminal writings resulted in a personal epiphany that led to a cause of action with consequent positive, indelible influence on the daily lives of those most oppressed. Wow, amazing. I hope you guys enjoyed that. In case you are lazy to read or you are too busy to read, you can be listening to these videos on the Hustlers Corner. The audio version is on all the platforms, whether it's Twitch, whether it's iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play or Google Podcast, iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Tidal, YouTube. We are everywhere as the Hustlers Corner. I'd like for you guys to subscribe on the platform in case you are landed on this video by accident. Click the like button and also share the video and let others know about this platform, since we are inspiring a brand new generation of hustlers and we are solely focused on Africans. If you are not an African, you are more than welcome to this content as well. But as long as you understand and you are not offended that this platform is strictly focusing on our African brothers and sisters, so we can get ourselves out of this entire mess that we are in. The next video will be focusing on chapter 1 on Steve Biko's works. I Write What I Like, his personal memoirs. This foreword that I just read was by Njabulo S Ndebel. Thank you very much, guys, for watching the video. It's time for the notification gang to click those sharp signs. Go to the like on 1, 2, 3. Click, 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 click.
This is the Hustlers Corner.